Thanks for listening to the Covenant Church podcast. We hope this message is encouraging for you, that it's inspiring in your life, and that it helps you take your next steps with Jesus. Now let's check it out.
I'm going to take the opportunity that is afforded to me, being in between sermon or teaching series, to present a special message today in honor of Memorial Day. Now, Memorial Day actually started a long time ago as Decoration Day. It was the day that people put flags and flowers on the graves of soldiers, people that have served, so that they did not forget, so they could remember. And eventually it was turned into Memorial Day. And it's on Memorial Day that we remember people and places. And I think normally we remember places and the people, known and unknown, that served in some of those places. And some of the places that are talked about on Memorial Day are places like Gettysburg and the Alamo, Flanders Field, Pearl Harbor, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, Kandahar, Afghanistan, places that I've never been. I've never visited one of those places, but I know about them because they've been talked about and are continually talked about generation after generation. There's a memorial set up to those places to remember those people. And that's what a memorial is all about. A memorial is a remembering tool, and it's a teaching tool, because none of us want to forget. And then we want to be able to help the next generation be able to remember. Even though it might not be a part of their story, we want to help make it a part of their history too. I don't know how many of you have ever been to the memorial at Fort McHenry in Baltimore, but it ought to be required of every American citizen, in my opinion. It's an amazing place. Most of you know, Fort McHenry was the place of a famous battle in the War of 1812, where British gunboats bombarded this fort which guarded Baltimore and the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay. And a lawyer from Washington, D.C., was there negotiating for the exchange of prisoners of war on a British ship. Man's name was Francis Scott Key. And as the battle began, they would not let him off the boat, because he would give away the strategy. So they made him stay on this British ship, and that is where he experienced this amazing battle that went all night long. He wondered the next day whether there would even be a Fort McHenry. But at the first light of dawn, he ran to the railing of the ship and looked to see what he could see, and the rest is history. And he wrote a poem to commemorate that experience, and it was called The Defense of Fort McHenry. Eventually, it was put to music, and now we know it as the Star-Spangled Banner. Listen, when you go to that memorial, there is no fort anymore. In fact, there's really not much there at all. There are a few cannons, if you like cannons. Apparently they're original. You can stand on the plot of land where the fort was, and you can look out into the Chesapeake Bay and imagine what it would be like to be fired upon. But really all that's there is a museum. And you go in the museum, and guess what you see in the museum? Flags. I mean, certainly just old, tattered, faded American flags. And it's fun just to see some of the different iterations of flags. But as you work your way around, you get to the end of the tour in that museum, and there is a movie and everyone sits and watches this movie, and they retell the whole story. They show reenactments of the battle, and they read from the original poem. And, it's like tingles go up your spine when you're listening to this poem. And then they get to the end of the story, and the movie ends, and someone comes on the loudspeaker and says, "So in honor and in memory of all the brave people who served to preserve this flag, to preserve our freedom, and gave their lives in order that we might be free, would you now stand and join us in singing the national anthem?" And when they say that, the screen goes up at the same time, and you realize that the whole back of the museum is a picture window. And right outside, there is this giant flagpole with an amazing American flag flying, which I didn't even see when I walked in. And there it is. And then we sing the national anthem. And I'll tell you, I'll never forget it. Standing, trying to sing. I couldn't sing. All I could do is cry when I saw it. And so I just wonder, on this Memorial Weekend, I wonder if you would stand and join with me in singing our national anthem. Would you stand? The older I get, the more sacred it is for me to remember. I don't know about you, but I can get worked up singing the national anthem. I can tear up when my favorite TV show goes off the air. I don't know what it is about me. Especially I get teary when I think of people that are special to me, people that have gone forward, people that have died, people that I don't want to forget and I want to remember. And that's why you set up a memorial, is because you don't want to forget. Now, the amazing thing to me, it's interesting, I think it's tragic, but I can get worked up about a national anthem, something, for the United States of America. I can feel patriotic, but I think for a lot of people can do that. The sad thing, though, is that most of us have a really hard time getting worked up about the goodness and the majesty and the holiness of our God. We forget. We ought not to forget, but we do. We forget all about the day we were baptized. You know, we go, oh yeah, I was baptized back some time ago. We forget when we got on our knees and we prayed to God. We poured out our heart and God answered that prayer. We forget that He did that. We forget the people who discipled us or led us to Christ. I mean, we ought not to forget, but we do. It's just human nature. In fact, knowing the tendency of people, God, through Moses, actually told the people of Israel before they ever went in the promised land these words: when the Lord your God brings you into the land He swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then, when you eat and are satisfied, listen, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Now, I bet when Moses spoke those words, people went, I won't forget. But they did, because people's memories are short. And that's why God told them that when you go into the promised land, you are to build a memorial site. Now, here's how it happened. Moses led the people out of Egypt, out of slavery. He was their leader. They marched through the Red Sea. They went to Mount Sinai. He brought them the 10 Commandments. And then for 40 years, He led them as they lived out in the desert. And just before they went into the promised land, Moses died. And his assistant, his protege, was appointed to be the new leader. And God told him, listen, today, Joshua, I am going to make you great in the eyes of all the people. They will follow your leadership forever. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the ark of God, which was that golden box that represented the presence of God. Take the ark, have 6 priests carry it down to the riverside and get ready to cross, because today you will cross over the Jordan River, through the Jordan River, and you will walk on dry land. And this is what he said. He says, as soon as the priest who carry the ark of the Lord, and then he tosses this in, the Lord of all the earth, okay, not just any God, this is the God. As soon as they set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. Now, don't you love that? Has anybody seen water stack before? Stack on top of each other? Don't you know some of them were going, I don't even know what that looks like. But that was the promise. Listen, as soon as the first priest steps into the Jordan River, and by the way, it was at flood stage, it was dangerous, it was fast flowing. You don't get in a flood-soaked river. He says, as soon as you step in, that is what is going to happen. And it says that that really just 2 things are possible. Either they're going to step in and they're going to sink to the bottom, and the ark's going to be lost and they're going to drown, or it's going to happen like God said it was going to happen. And so they step in, and as soon as the first guy's foot hits, the water starts to stack. And it stacks up 20 miles back downstream. And then the rest of the water just keeps flowing down the stream, and all of a sudden, right in front of everyone is a patch of land that leads right to the promised land. And of course, it's a river bottom, so it's muddy, but all of a sudden it starts to dry up. And it is passable. You can walk across it. And it says, all of the children of Israel, all the Israelites, and there were millions of them, ran across as fast as they could into the promised land. Now, I love what happens next. After they all get across and they all hurry across, they are so excited. It says, Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. This is where they're still standing out there where they stepped in. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of Israel to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. So let me just point out 4 quick things. First, the question is, where did the stones come from that they built the memorial? Where did they come from? They came from the middle of the river. Anybody can pick up a rock from the edge, but you can't get a rock from the middle unless you can get to the middle. And the whole thing was open. So they walked to the middle of the river and they picked up stones. How large were the stones? Well, they were so large they had to be put on the guy's shoulder. It was everything the guy could carry. So a large, significant stone. The third question I'd ask is, how many stones were there? There were 12 stones. They represented the 12 tribes of Israel. All of God's people went into the promised land. That's what it says. All 12 of the tribes, the descendants of Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then the last question is, how long were they supposed to keep the memorial up? What is the answer? Forever. This will be a lasting memorial so that generation after generation will know. Now listen, that's why you put up memorials. In fact, there are 2 reasons that we build memorials. The first one is we set them up so we will not forget, because we have short memories, right? We don't want to forget. Now, you would go, surely they wouldn't forget the water stacking up on top of itself. I mean, who could forget the water at flood stage and watching that first priest step in and the water split? Could you forget that? Could you forget what it was like, you and your family running across to the promised land? But they did. It's easy to forget. I hate it, but it's so easy to forget. Our memories are so short. I mean, do you remember what the Bible says happened to these people's parents? How long it took after Moses parted the Red Sea. God parted this thing and Moses led them through. How many days did it take before they started complaining? 3. Now you would think, well, surely they wouldn't say, let's go back. Let's go back. God can't lead us. Moses was going, do you not remember? He split the Red Sea. He drowned all of the Egyptian army. He can take care of you out here in the desert. People forget. That's why we set up a memorial for ourselves. And then the second reason is we set them up so we can teach our children what is important to us. You know, I'm always amazed when I go to the Memorial Day service set up by our military folks that there are no children there. Hardly any children. In fact, I look around sometimes and I go, you know what? I'm the youngest person here. You know, and I'm not young anymore. I just go, I'm the youngest. What is going on? Where is everybody? I guess they're at the pool or at the beach. I mean, the reason that you have the day off is not to go to the beach. The reason you have the day off is to remember, is to learn, is to memorialize, and to cultivate those histories for yourself. This is what Joshua says to them. He said to the Israelites, all right, they make this pile of 12 stones, this memorial. And he said, in the future, when your descendants ask their fathers, what do these stones mean? Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry land, dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord. Listen, you memorialize what you think is important, which is why, for Christian people, this is why we bring our children to worship with us. Because what do we want to teach them? To worship. We want them to see that we are worshipers. We want them to not just know that we have a Bible, we want them to see us reading our Bibles. We want them to see that we trust in the Word of God and that we are doing those things, right? We teach what is important. We teach them to tithe because we tithe. We teach them to pray because they see us praying. I mean, that is what is important to you, you do, and you memorialize so that you will not forget. Now, here's the sad thing. It says that this pile of stones is to be a lasting memorial forever. Where is it now? It's not there. You go, how could that be? How could it not be there? Well, let me tell you what happened. Folks stopped taking their children to see the stones. You know, it's a long ways down there to the stones, right? Or we're really busy today doing other things. We ain't got time to go down there and look at a pile of rocks. And so they stopped going down there to look at the stones, and they stopped retelling the story. And so a generation or two passes, and then someone says, what are these stones for? And those people said, I have no idea what they're for. I don't even know why they're standing up here. Must have something to do with worship or something. And then a couple more generations went along, and somebody said, these stones are in our way. Somebody remove these stones so we can build a beach house here next to the river. Right? And then they were gone. All because people failed to remember. That's sad, isn't it? Now, there's one more part of the story, which is a great part, and it's just this one little detail, which I wanted to make sure I include. There is another pile of stones in this story. So you've got the one that is on the beach right next to the river. It's on the riverbank. And then you've got another one, which is a personal set of 12 stones set up by Joshua. It says Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle, this is another 12, had been in the middle of the Jordan, at the spot where the priest who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood. And they are there to this day. Now, I've known about this, but I've always figured that they must have stacked them really high so that when the water went back over, you could see them sticking out. All right, else, why would you have them? But then that didn't make any sense, really. Why do you need two sets of stones? You've got the one set over here. Why do you need another set out in the middle? Why don't you just have one set in the middle if you're trying to mark the spot? And so as I've studied it this week, I realized that those stones were never meant to be seen. They're underwater. They're underwater, and no one sees them. So how do you know that they're still there to this day? Because Joshua told his children. And Joshua's children told their children, and they told their children, and they told their children. And then when the person gets around to recording this in the Bible, they say, by the way, those other stones aren't there anymore, but the ones that were put there by Joshua are still there to this day. They are a memorial set up by Joshua. And who is the memorial for? Who are they trying to memorialize? May I tell you? Two groups of people. The first group, I think these rocks, these stones represented those people who went first into the river. They represent the 6 guys who took the chance and stepped in the river. Okay, I don't know their names anymore. I'm sure their names were prominent then, but we don't know their names. There's 6 priests who took a chance, right? They took the first step, all right? Everybody can take the second step, can't they? Okay, hey, it's dry, let's run. The first guy, that's a different story. You know, it's like, here we go. We're either going to die or we're going to take God at His word. And these guys took God at His word. And I just love it. There were some other people that came to the river years before, and they crossed over, and they saw that the land was flowing with milk and honey, and they also saw that there were giants in the land, and so they came back across the river, and they told the people, go back where you came from. We can't go over there. There are giants. I mean, it's a nice land, but we would be killed. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. We cannot go over there into that land. The men who crossed with the ark in front of Joshua did not have that on their hearts. They say, we are going and we are never coming back. We are taking that land today. I think Joshua put those rocks there to commemorate those men who went first. We took a vacation several years ago to Charleston, South Carolina. It's a very historical place. If you've ever, it's shrimp and grits is good too. All right, but a lot of history there. And we took several tours around the city, and one of the tours pointed us to a Methodist church that is in the central part of Charleston. And the thing about this Methodist church, it's an older church. It's been refurbished and everything, but the part that is historical about it is that the pulpit that is still being used was also used by Bishop Francis Asbury. Now, some of you don't know that name. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, laid his hands on Bishop Asbury, on Francis Asbury, and he sent him as his personal envoy to the States for the spread of the gospel and of the Methodist movement. And Francis Asbury, all by himself, on horseback, went from place to place and planted more than 1,000 churches. And he went from, if you can even imagine this, from Georgia to Massachusetts and all the way as far as the Mississippi River, planting churches everywhere he went. Asbury came on horseback at one point to a little hamlet in Granville County, North Carolina, which is Creedmoor, Franklinton, Oxford, that's Granville County. And he came to a spot in the road and he set up his preaching tour and he preached to a group of people who were there. And a certain Mr. Mitchell gave his life to Christ on that day. That man was my great, great, great grandfather. And so I'm a 6th generation Methodist, which I'm really proud of, but I'm who I am today because a guy rode his horse. And he went to Granville County and he loved Jesus enough to talk about Jesus and introduce him to Mr. Mitchell. And so I'm in South Carolina, and we attended that church, and it was fine. It was okay. I didn't shake the pastor's hand at the end. I just wanted to go up and touch that pulpit. I am who I am because of that guy. Who is that for you? Who are those people for you? They went first, and you are who you are because of their first step. Maybe it's your parents. Maybe it's your grandparents. Maybe it's a Sunday school teacher. For some people, it is a neighborhood lady who invited you to come to a little after-school Bible club where you learned about Jesus. Who are those people today? We cannot forget them. We cannot forget them. We are who we are because of them. And then there's another group I think Joshua was memorializing. It was those people who never made it to the promised land. Because there were a whole bunch of people whose bodies were buried out in the desert and they never got to cross over to the promised land. And so I believe some of those stones represent people like Moses. They represent Aaron. I mean, think about it. He is laying a stone thinking about the slaves who built bricks without straw, who were hard-pressed by their taskmasters, the people who lived out in the desert for 40 years before all of their bodies were buried out there, and they never got to come. And I think Joshua says, we will not forget those people. I mean, some of them have names, like Moses has a name. Other people, we don't even remember their names. Some of their names we don't even try to pronounce. We read the book of Numbers and we go, and all those people. That's who those stones represent. People along the way in our lives. There's some people like that for you, that you've forgotten all about them, but you don't want to forget them. You know, I think about, there was a group of people who came to my local church, and they put on something called a lay witness mission, which means they were not pastors, they were just lay people who loved Jesus, and they put on an entire weekend, and something happened to my parents that weekend. You could tell they grew up going to church, but after that weekend, they knew Jesus. Something happened, and I will be eternally grateful to some people. I don't even know their names, but I'm so glad they decided to come to my church and tell my parents about Jesus. And I don't want to forget that. There's some people like that you don't want to forget. Maybe it's someone who saw something in you that was particularly powerful, and they said, you have gifts. That you are someone that would be an excellent teacher, a Bible study leader, small group leader. They saw something in you. I thank God for these 2 sophomore girls at Wake Forest who kept coming back to my room when I told them to go away. And they just kept coming back saying, you would be really good in our group. Why don't you come to our small group? Why don't you come to our small group? And finally, I just went because they were worrying me to death. And the next year, I was leading the small group. And I'll never forget them for their tenacity. Listen, we don't want to forget any of those people along the way. So we set up a memory, a memorial, and then we tell people about it. We tell people. We tell our children. Let me tell you how we got here. Let me tell you about who went first. Let me tell you about who led me to Christ. Let me tell you why this is important to me. Because listen, we cannot forget. We cannot forget. It's that important. And so I'm going to ask you to do something today. We're just going to close the service without any music today. I'm going to ask you to stand right now. And I would just say, in a similar way we did earlier, in honor of some and in memory of others, of people that have brought you where you are. The reason, and you might even say, the reason I'm here at worship today is because of this person. The reason I'm a Christian today is because this person invited me, this person shared Christ with me, this person discipled me. It's different for every single person, but everyone is able to name somebody today. All right, so sometimes we do things here like we do like Korean-style prayer, which means that we all pray out loud at the same time. It doesn't go well because there are hardly any Koreans here. All right? But anyway, it's a great exercise. So we're going to do it out loud, and we're going to, on three, I want you to say someone's name out loud, okay? Whoever it is that you would remember in honor of this weekend that has made a difference in your life for Jesus Christ. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Jerry Smith. We ought to be louder, right? We ought to be louder. Listen, I'm so glad you were here this weekend. Let's be people that set up memorials. Not because we forget, and because we want the next generation to remember. So God bless you as you go, and let's go be people with long memories. In Jesus' name, amen.
For service times, or to find out how to take your next step with Jesus, or just to learn more about how you can get involved, head over to covenant.cc or follow us on social media. We hope to see you soon.